Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Ever think about how, like, what if all our scientific progress, backfired?
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Created a nightmare. That's the whole idea behind The Veil, this post-apocalyptic thriller by J.J. Cross.
Right.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives like this. You can find a link to the book in the description. It really makes you think about, like, the choices we make and
Yeah.
what happens because of them. It follows Aaro, and he's the main character,
Okay.
as he's trying to survive in a world taken over by these scary creatures.
Oh, wow.
They're called Varas. But before all the crazy stuff happens, the book sets up this really interesting background.
Yeah, the thing that got me was how J.J. Cross, shows us all this hope
Yeah,
before all the horror. Like, Project Argus, that's the project behind these Varas, was
yeah,
supposed to bring everyone together.
yeah.
It was seen as this huge step forward, sending these wolf-like creatures, they were genetically engineered,
Mm.
to explore another planet.
You're right. It's not all doom and gloom from the beginning. You get caught up in all the excitement of this global science project,
Yeah.
and then boom, Cross hits you with the,
The Varas, they were designed to be sterile, but they start, reproducing.
really?
And then this huge accident happens and they're all over Earth. The book really shows that difference between all the optimism at the beginning
Yeah.
and the total panic that happens after. It makes you think twice about messing with nature, playing God.
It's like a warning about things we don't expect. You feel that change from excitement to terror, especially through Aaro's point of view. He's just thrown into this nightmare.
Right.
He's constantly fighting these Varas just to stay alive. The book doesn't shy away from showing how dangerous they are, like their cold-blooded nature, how they act as a pack,
Yeah.
and their scary hunting instincts.
Exactly. And those details are super important for understanding the world J.J. Cross created. It's not just about surviving against a few Varas here and there.
Right.
It's about surviving on a planet where the whole ecosystem has been messed up. This threat has changed how humans live and interact. It shows how fragile our civilization is.
Yeah, it's not just a monster story. It's about how this event makes humanity adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And even with all this chaos, Arrow finds these little bits of hope. Like, his relationship with Serena becomes
Yeah.
this, anchor of human connection amidst all the fear and violence.
Aaro and Serena's relationship, it's so interesting. It shows a main theme of the book.
Okay.
Even when things are super bad, humans still need to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Their bond is a powerful contrast to how brutal the Varas are
Yeah.
and how society is falling apart around them.
And there's that little girl, Leela, that Arrow meets. That part really emphasizes compassion
Oh, yeah.
and innocence, even with all the horror.
For sure. Lila represents something pure and innocent in this harsh, dangerous world.
Right.
Her presence reminds Aaro and the reader of the human cost of this disaster.
Mm-hmm.
It adds another layer to his struggle for survival. It's not just about him anymore.
So then Aro ends up going on this dangerous mission to Murmansk to get a nuclear reactor.
Oh, wow.
The book puts you right in the middle of it, describing the risky journey
Right.
and the moral compromises he has to make along the way.
This mission becomes a turning point for Aaro. It makes him ask himself some hard questions.
Yeah.
What's he willing to sacrifice for a chance at rebuilding? Can he justify doing bad things if the end result might be good? It really digs into the gray areas of survival.
And that's what makes The Veil so gripping.
Yeah.
It's not just about the action, it's about these tough choices. You keep asking yourself, what would I do?
Totally.
Even without giving away the ending, the book makes you think about the future of humanity and the choices we make.
Exactly. It leaves you with a feeling of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Will we learn from our mistakes, or will we just make them again? Will Aara's mission actually change anything, or is it just a desperate attempt at hope that's fading away? J.J. Cross doesn't give us easy answers, which makes it all the more thought-provoking.
Now, remember how we were talking about how the Varas are genetically engineered?
Yeah.
There's a whole scientific backstory about how they were created, and it's both fascinating and kind of scary.
What's fascinating is how it mixes scientific ambition
Right.
with, ethical blindness. The scientists who made the Varas, especially this guy, Doctor Gertlinger, are brilliant,
Okay.
but they're also, too confident.
Mm-hmm.
They're so focused on the good things their creation could do that they completely miss, or maybe even ignore, the risks.
And that comes back to bite them, big time. The book goes into how the Varas' genes, especially the reptile DNA mixed with wolf DNA, makes them so tough and adaptable.
Yeah.
One detail that I found really interesting was why they used wolf DNA. Gertlinger, he actually says that wolves have a certain intelligence
Yeah,
and problem-solve the ability that robots don't. They wanted creatures that could learn, adapt, and make decisions on their own, which would make them better explorers.
that's interesting.
Like they were trying to create the ultimate survival machine,
Yeah,
but they ended up creating their worst nightmare.
right.
The book really shows that tension between scientific progress and ethical responsibility.
It makes you think about how far we'll go for knowledge
Yeah.
and whether we're really thinking about the consequences of our actions. It's a theme that's super relevant today,
Totally.
especially with all the advancements in things like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence.
It definitely makes you stop and think, right?
Yeah,
Like, how much risk are we willing to take in the name of progress?
right.
And when do we cross that line into what's ethically questionable?
Well, the book makes you face those questions head on.
Yeah.
It's not a simple black and white situation. There are arguments for both sides. But in the end, the veil is a warning about how our own cleverness can backfire. It's a reminder that we need to think about the ethics of what we do, especially when we're messing with nature.
And talking about messing with nature, let's talk about the moment everything goes wrong.
Okay.
The book describes this terrible accident that lets the Voras loose on Earth. It's pure chaos and terror.
The accident changes everything in the story.
Yeah.
It marks the shift from optimism and scientific progress to a desperate fight for survival.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even our best technology can fail and the results can be devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just some random event.
Really?
There are hints of sabotage,
Wow.
of internal conflicts within the GSC, the group behind Project Argus.
That element of conspiracy makes the story even more complex.
Definitely.
It makes you question if Avara's getting out was really an accident or if someone did it on purpose.
Right.
Was someone trying to mess up the project?
Yeah.
And if so, why? It keeps you guessing and adds to the suspense.
And it also highlights that human systems and institutions can fail. Even with good intentions, things can go wrong. And when they do, the consequences can be huge.
The book really captures the feeling of helplessness
Yeah.
and fear that follows the accident. People are running for their lives,
Right.
trying to understand this new reality. And in the middle of all this chaos, we first meet Aaro.
Okay.
We see him struggle to adapt, to survive, and to deal with the huge loss he's experienced.
Aaro's journey becomes a representation of humanity's struggle to adapt and survive in this new world.
Yeah.
He goes from an ordinary guy to like a reluctant hero,
Mm-hmm.
forced to face his fears
Yeah.
and make hard choices to stay alive.
And his story's just beginning. We'll dive deeper into Aaro's journey and the challenges he faces in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
But for now, I want you to think about this. Imagine you're Aaro. How would you react if you were facing this much chaos and danger? What choices would you make?
That's a tough one. That's a question that really makes you think about the book, right? Like, The Veil isn't just an action-packed thriller.
Right.
It's like this thought experiment about how people act under extreme pressure.
Totally. And to survive, Aaro has to, change. It's not just fighting off individual Varas,
Yeah.
but understanding how they, think, how they hunt. The book really puts you in that survival mindset.
One thing I found interesting was how the book describes the Vara's senses.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they experience the world so differently than humans.
Yeah.
Their sense of smell, their night vision, it's like you're always being watched, hunted.
It's almost like claustrophobic,
Right.
Like even when there aren't any Varas around.
Yeah.
They could be right there, but you can't see them.
Right. It plays on that basic fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And it makes Aaro's journey to Murmansk even more intense.
Right.
It's not just a road trip.
Yeah.
It's a constant battle against the environment and these super evolved predators.
You said before that Aaro's mission is a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so important for how he grows?
Well, on the surface, it's about getting this nuclear reactor, something that could help rebuild society. But for Aaro, it becomes something more.
Right.
It's a way to make up for his past mistakes, maybe even find some purpose in this world that's fallen apart.
So it's like he's trying to gain back some control
Exactly.
in the world that feels so unpredictable.
Yeah, but the mission also forces him to make some really tough choices that test his morals. It's not a clear-cut hero's journey. It's more like going into this gray area where survival sometimes means making hard decisions.
Speaking of hard decisions, what about who's really behind the Varas getting out? We talked about those hints of sabotage before.
Oh, yeah.
Does the book ever tell us the truth?
It does, but not how you'd expect.
Okay.
It turns out the reasons are complicated, tied to political stuff and power struggles within the GSC.
Mm,
It's not a simple good versus evil thing.
right.
but more like a web of conflicting interests and consequences no one saw coming.
So it emphasizes that idea of human fallibility again.
Totally.
Even with the best intentions, what we do can have huge and unforeseen consequences.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that theme of arrogance we discussed.
Yeah.
The people in charge, the ones who made the Varas, they
Yes.
thought they had everything under control. But the book reminds us that nature is unpredictable.
Right.
And trying to manipulate it can often blow up in our faces.
Okay, but what about the other survivors?
Oh, yeah.
The book introduces all these different characters,
Mm-hmm.
each with their own way of dealing with this new world.
Right.
It's not just about Aaro, is it?
You're right. The Veil explores different sides of how humans are resilient.
Yeah.
There are those who try to rebuild communities,
Right.
those who become tough and isolated, and those who hold on to hope even when it's really dark.
Serena's a great example of that.
Yeah.
She's strong,
Mhm.
independent,
Hmm.
and she shows a different kind of strength than Aaro.
Yeah.
It's not just about physical survival,
Right.
but about keeping your humanity, your compassion, when everything is horrible.
And what about Leela, that little girl Aaro meets? She represents something totally different, doesn't she?
Yeah, Layla's innocence really shows us what's at stake in this disaster.
Mm-hmm.
She's a reminder of what's been lost, what we could lose.
Yeah.
And she forces Aaro to ask himself, what future is he fighting for? Is it even possible to rebuild a world worth living in?
These characters and their relationships with Aaro add so much to the story.
Totally.
They show the range of way humans respond to trauma and hardship.
And they challenge Aaro to think beyond just staying alive himself.
Yeah.
He starts to understand that rebuilding a society isn't just about getting rid of the threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's about protecting those who are vulnerable,
Yeah.
those who represent the future.
Now, you mentioned how J.J. Cross writes earlier.
Yeah.
What makes it so good at showing this post-apocalyptic world?
For me, it's how he uses sensory details.
Yeah.
It's not just about what things look like,
Right.
but what they feel like, smell like, even taste like.
Mhm.
You're really in that world,
Yeah.
and the danger feels so real.
One example that I remember is the description of those modified vehicles the survivors use.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a mix of Mad Max and high-tech military stuff.
Right.
But the way he describes the sounds, the vibrations, the smell of the engine grease,
Right.
it brings those vehicles to life.
You're right. It's not just telling you about the world. It's putting you right there.
Exactly. And that feeling of being immersed extends to the Varas, too.
Hmm.
Remember how you said that their descriptions creeped you out?
Mm-hmm.
It's because Cross doesn't just tell you they're dangerous.
Yeah.
He makes you feel it.
There's that scene where they're stuck in the truck during the blizzard,
Oh, yeah.
and the Varas are all around outside.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that claustrophobia, the desperation.
Yeah.
Like I was right there with them.
That's what good writing does.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just the plot and characters.
Yeah.
It creates an experience.
Mhm.
And in The Veil, that experience is raw, scary, but you can't put it down.
But even with all the darkness and danger, you mentioned there's hope.
Right.
Where do you see that in the book?
I think it's woven into the choices the characters make,
Mhm.
their relationships, like
Yeah.
Aaro and Serena,
Right.
their love for each other, their commitment.
Yeah.
It becomes this act of defiance against all the despair in the world.
Right.
It reminds you that even with all this horror,
Hmm.
humans can still find ways to connect, to love, to find meaning.
And that brings us back to the mission to Murmansk.
Yeah.
It's dangerous, morally complex,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately driven by that hope for a better future.
Aaro's willingness to risk everything,
Yeah.
to face not just the Varas, but the Russian military too,
Right.
shows that the human spirit is strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder that even when everything seems lost,
Yeah.
there are people who will fight for a chance to rebuild, to find redemption.
So we've talked about where the Varas came from, their impact on the world, what the survivors are going through.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the bigger picture? What's
Yeah.
the overall message J.J. Cross is trying to say with The Veil?
It's a message with like a lot of sides to it, touching on human ambition, responsibility, and that never-ending power of hope. On the one hand, it's a cautionary tale. The Veil shows how our pursuit of progress, especially in science, can have these like unintended and devastating consequences if we're not careful.
Like we talked about before, that whole playing God thing with genetic engineering is like a reminder that we don't always have control over what we create, you know?
Exactly. And it goes beyond just science. The book also looks at the political stuff, those power struggles that lead to the disaster. It shows how human greed, ambition, and short-sightedness can make those consequences even worse.
So it's not just about the risks of science, but also about the systems and institutions behind those advancements.
Right? But it's not all doom and gloom. Amidst all that darkness and despair, there are those glimmers of hope we talked about. There are people like Aaro and Serena who decide to fight for a better future, even when everything seems lost. There are acts of kindness, compassion, and self-sacrifice that show us the good that still exists in humanity.
It's like the book is saying that even when we're facing our own destruction, we still have the capacity for love, connection, and rebuilding. And maybe those qualities are what will save us.
That's a powerful message, especially in a post-apocalyptic story. It's easy to be cynical and give up hope when you imagine a world destroyed by disaster. But The Veil offers a different perspective. It acknowledges the darkness, the horrible things humans are capable of, but it also says we can be resilient, hopeful, and rebuild.
It's like a reminder that even when things are really bad, the human spirit can survive, and that we always have a choice, even if it's just to keep fighting, to keep believing in a better future.
Now, you mentioned that the book leaves you with some unanswered questions. What are you still thinking about even after finishing the story?
One question that stays with me is like, what happens to humanity? The book doesn't really tell us. We see hints of what the future might hold, but it's uncertain, fragile. It really makes you think, can we learn from our mistakes? Can we rebuild a world that's fairer, more sustainable, more compassionate? Or will we just keep making the same destructive choices?
It's a question a lot of readers have, I think. We live in a time of amazing technology, but also a time of growing social and environmental problems. The Veil makes us face the possibility that our own cleverness could destroy us, but it also gives a little bit of hope that we can choose a different path.
Like the book is a call to action, telling us to be more thoughtful, responsible, and caring in our choices, both as individuals and as a whole.
That's a message worth thinking about, worth talking about, even if there aren't any easy answers.
Well said. Before we finish our deep dive into the veil, I want to hear from you, the listener. What stood out to you most in this story? Was it the action and survival, the tough choices the characters faced, or the thought-provoking questions about humanity's future? Tell us your favorite moment, what you took away from the book in the comments below. We love hearing what you think. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more explorations of interesting books and ideas. Until next time, keep reading and keep those deep dives coming.